Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Help for the Guiltless. My name, of course, is Antoine. Now, before I start, I do want to say thank you to the Canadian Rogue. He designed that intro video that you just saw, and he did it pro bono. So I'm very happy with the outcome, and he was very exuberant in delivering. I will probably be using it for the foreseeable future. Now, with that out of the way, I have to make a correction, and I don't do it often, because I'm usually right about things. Last week, in a video, I defended The Guardian. I defended The Guardian in the fact that they basically threw Salon under the bus with the whole Black Panther thing. I praised The Guardian. I even, gave it a standing ovation. And then I read this. Manxiety needs fempathy in defense of mansplaining by Victoria Corin Mitchell. It's the tagline that caught my eye. Actually, chaps, we women do know stuff. Yet, if explaining things keeps you happy, do carry on. I'm not looking forward to this. As a matter of fact, the only thing I'm looking forward to after this is a very large glass of brandy. But let's let Victoria lead us through the tumultuous times that she was mansplained to. I'm sure it's going to be enlightening for the rest of us. It made me feel sentimental to see mansplaining in the news again. Did you read the story? Actually, there have been two. The first was that Unionen, Sweden's largest trade union, has launched a mansplaining hotline for women to phone if they've been a victim of male condescension. What is the hotline going to do? Are they going to talk you down from the ledge that you're on because someone explained something to you? I'm sorry, a male explained something to you? Are you going to throw out everything that you know as a strong, independent woman because one man decided to over-explain something? Do they contact the authorities for you? Is it kind of like 911, a life-or-death situation? I'm actually kind of curious. What happens if a man calls the hotline for mansplaining? Even better, what if they call the mansplaining hotline and a man answers the phone? Do they then hang up because they're afraid to be mansplained to again? There seems to be a whole lot of logistics to this that aren't quite explained. I'm going to link the article that they're talking about down below as well, and you can take a look for yourself. Oh, with what shivers of nostalgia this took me back. Back to the salad days of, 2013. It must have been when I first heard the term. It was pretty obvious what it meant. Though somebody, probably a man, told me anyway. Mansplaining is when a man explains something to a female in unnecessary detail. Often a female who understands it better than he does. I was familiar with the phenomenon, of course. Every woman has had a simple thing explained to her at interminable length by a man. That's just basic social interaction. Did you just womansplain to me what mansplaining is? I'm offended. On top of that, did you assume that person's gender? You need to really check yourself if you're going to do these identity politics things, because you're really hurting the sisterhood. Of course, it's annoying. Nobody likes to be treated like a fool. Of course, it's boring. Nobody likes to be lectured. But still, how wistfully I remember the luxury of being troubled by that sort of thing in the long-lost Idol of 2013. No one likes to be treated like a fool. But when you're acting as one, well, then it needs to be pointed out. And I love to point out fools. And being lectured to, well, if you took it as a lecture when someone was trying to explain something, I think you have trouble defining the term explanation. Because if you interrupt someone who is explaining something to you, more often than not, you're going to get a lecture after you have been made the fool of for not understanding what's being said. Do you remember what troubled you back then? On the world stage, I mean. You may have struggled, may still struggle, with all sorts of private worries. A medical trauma, a row at work, a harrowing debt, the way your wife runs out of the room giggling when her phone bleeps late at night, that weird recurrent dream you had about the Merrow Festival. So you're already assuming that whoever you're talking about being a man, that their wife is running around on them, which is why she runs out of the room giggling with her phone bleeping. Well, it's good to know where your head is at. But the things we worried about generally in 2013, my word, I spent serious time worrying about whether the 500-year-old remains of Richard III should be buried in York or Leicester. Those were the bloody days. Why are you worried about Richard III? I'm assuming this is sarcasm. Hopefully. Have we really got time and space now to kvetch about whether men talk to women in a patronizing way, with all the other wars that threaten to wage? It's the internet age. People have time to take pictures of the food they eat. You're worrying about kvetching about whether men talk to women in a patronizing way? Have you seen Twitter? The truth is, I don't think mansplaining is even sexist. I don't think men reserve a patronizing tone for women alone. It's just how they talk. In the original essay, Men Explain Things to Me, which, although not actually coining the zeitgeisty word, is credited with being the core identifier of the tendency, author Rebecca Solnit writes about a man who lectured her on the subject of one of her own published books. Because he employed the sort of painstaking, long-winded detail that Solnit herself would only use if giving instructions to an idiot, she assumed the man thought she was an idiot. But the point that I think has been missed by Solnit, and by all the women who have written and talked about mansplaining ever since, is men also talk this way to each other. It's not that they don't defer to women, it's that they don't defer to anyone. She may be onto something here. You know, when you've been working a job for, say, 15, 20 years, and the new person comes in, and they are young and boisterous, full of vim and vigor, and they decide to try and do things their way, the person who's been there longer will condescend to them. They don't want to defer to them because they don't know what they're doing. So, if the work that the person was lecturing her about, maybe he knew a little bit more than she did, even if it was published in her own book. It's just a thought. I mean, we don't know the exact conversation. You didn't really say anything. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to mansplain. It's going to get my manxiety up. I'm going to need your empathy really soon to understand that I don't like doing this. It's just something that's ingrained in me. Men simply love explaining things. That is what men want to do in conversation. Make jokes and explain things. Your average man would be happy to tell Gareth Southgate how to manage the England football team, or the head of MI6 how to deal with ISIS, or Stephen Hawking what he reckons about black holes. Okay, one of those things is true, but that's because it has to do with sports. Men don't like to explain things. Believe it or not, most men I know just want to explain things the once and let it go. That's why we go into detail about things. We want to explain these things to you, so you understand them, so we don't have to talk to you about them again. Now, like I said, one of these three examples you gave is very much true. Every sports fan out there would understand this. You are an armchair quarterback or an armchair coach, someone who sits at home watching baseball, telling the pitcher what pitches he should throw, because you know more about the stats and the play of the game than the person actually playing it. And it's not just men who do that. I know more women now that actually are paying attention to sports that do the exact same thing. Telling the head of MI6 how to deal with ISIS? Are you fucking kidding me? The people who would try and do that are the ones who watch too many Bond films and telling Stephen Hawking what he reckons about black holes. You're mistaking interest and conversation for explaining things. I think I'm getting it now. You don't understand the difference between a man having interests and a man actually explaining things. It isn't about the person they're talking to. It's about themselves. If anything, the inclination would be to be seen as a compliment. They offer their nuggets of wisdom as a gift, like a cat offers a half-eaten bird. Or, and this is just a thought, if I'm talking to the head of MI6, and I know nothing about him other than the fact that he's the head of MI6, I'm gonna talk to him about MI6. It's seen as a courtesy, not a compliment. Because I don't know him, I don't know what his personal life is like. So, yes, I will offer up a nugget of wisdom that I think I have. As a conversation. Something to talk about. Over tea. That doesn't mean there's no danger in the mansplaining tendency. Many of the world's problems can probably be traced to the way men take this approach into government, filling the atmosphere with a load of hot, unschooled certainty. I suspect we'd be better off if we all reached consensus by respecting others' opinions and experience. Kind of like most people fucking do. If I go into the Oval Office and I sit across the desk from the president, I'm going to have some things to say, but at the same time, I'm also going to have to know that I have to listen to him, because he's had the experience of doing it. What you're saying is that all of the world's problems can be traced back to men, and it's all their blustering and blowhardedness. It's all pride and cock size. I don't know if you've actually ever been in an actual conversation with someone. You should try it. It's fun, actually listening to their experiences, giving your own in response. But I don't want you to take too many difficult steps in becoming an actual human being. But socially, no harm is meant by it. Men would be terribly sad if they were told they must never explain anything again. They get so much pleasure from being expansive, from chewing over their thoughts, sharing a bit of half-remembered fact or quote, airing the little epicure that occurred to them when driving along the M6, and sometimes it's properly informative or enjoyable. Again, I want to say these. Men want to explain things once. Other than that, all of these things that you've mentioned, half-remembered quotes or facts, chewing over their thoughts, those are conversation starters. That is Christmas for most men. Sipping a tasty drink, reaching for the nutcrackers, and settling in for a good long disquisition on why it rains, or what's wrong with modern television, or whither North Korea. See, this is why men feel like they have to explain things in detail to you. You are taking the idea of having a conversation as mansplaining, that we have to do it, that it's ingrained in our blood, that it's the best thing in the world to us. But you don't understand the difference between having a conversation with someone and explaining something. And if you ask me, the biggest problem facing our Western world at the moment is the decline of kindness. As huge differences of opinion batter against each other, we forget to be gentle and careful with each other's dreams, respectful of each other's self-worth. There's your problem. You see, you want everyone to be nice to you. You don't like that people don't like you, and you don't like that people don't like your opinion. There are people who don't like my opinion. Do you want to know what I have to say to them? Fuck off! If you don't like it, stop watching. If you don't like it, don't listen. I don't have to be respectful of you. I don't know you. I don't care to know you. And because of this article, I hope I never run into you on the street, because I'm going to have to mansplain to you the difference between an actual conversation and what you are accusing men of all being unable to control. It means a lot to your poor old dad, uncle, colleague, husband, or friend to offer his advice and insights. Sitting there, mug or glass clutched eagerly in hand, looking forward to holding forth, how much do you really want to see him quiet and disappointed, confronting his own limitations? How much do you want to shout, "Nobody gives a shit, Granddad, you pompous old bore. Let's talk about me"? How much are you actually reduced if you let him feel listened to? That's a good question. Now, if you want to shout down your granddad, who you probably don't see all that often, you're a bitch. Plain and simple. You deserve every scorned look that you get at every family gathering. How much are you actually reduced if you let your dad, uncle, colleague, husband, or friend feel listened to for once? At the start of this column, I said there had been 2 recent stories about mansplaining. The first was that the 600,000-strong Unionin has launched a mansplaining hotline, and the second, which followed soon after, is that the majority of the calls to the hotline have been from men, anxious, self-doubting men, asking exactly what mansplaining is and how to avoid doing it. That's because we don't want to be seen as being condescending. We don't want to be seen as talking down to you. We want to know that if we explain something to you, and if we explain it well enough, you'll understand. Beware of throwing your ire at the wrong target. It's so easy to get angry about things. Too easy. We get distracted from what's actually important, dissipating our energy with the wrong fights. Women don't want to be silenced by men, but I don't think the answer is for us to silence them in return. So, I want you to understand. I'm not angry at this woman. I don't ever want to meet her in person, because I really would probably mansplain to her the difference between a conversation and an explanation. But I have some issues with what she said. The first, she doesn't explain what Manxiety is. Is it the fact that we are too eager to explain everything? We're on pins and needles to the point where we have to jump at you in order to explain something. Because if that's the case, she's wrong. Now, this is just an opinion piece, and the way that it's written, you can tell that it's made to be kind of humorous. That's why I gave it more of a dramatic flair. But she makes a very good point, and it's one that I do believe in, and it's in her very last 2 sentences. Women don't want to be silenced by men, but I don't think the answer is for us to silence them in return. Because when you label something in a pejorative like mansplaining, you are trying to silence the person who is talking. Don't mansplain to me. Well, that's a conversation halter, not a starter. So I commend Victoria for actually understanding that mansplaining is stupid, and pointing out that the hotline was called by men because they didn't want to mansplain, because they didn't know what it was. It shows more empathy from the men than the women who just want to tell their grandfathers to shut up because they're pompous and boring. This all comes down to conversation, folks. It's the most important tool we have. And the second half of that is learning how to listen. And those are my thoughts, folks. I'd love to know yours. Let me know in the comments. If you like what I do here, please hit like, share, and subscribe. And if you do subscribe, hit that little bell icon so you know when I upload. If you'd like more of me, you can always join me every Tuesday at 4:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where you can join Brockus, Zell, Lo-Fi, and myself for Proper Villains Live. Or you can always join me on my Discord. The links are down below. If you'd like to support the channel, I have links below for Patreon, Maker Support, and a link to PayPal for one-time donations. There's also a link to a very awesome merch store. But with that being said, this has been Help for the Guildless. My name, of course, is Antoine, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.